Thank you to be here for this webinar. Maria and myself will be holding. First, a little presentation. I let you present yourself, Maria.
Sure. Hello, everyone, and thank you for connecting. I'm Maria. I'm a lawyer from Colombia. I have more than 7 years as a contract and business lawyer in the IT industry, and I just completed my MBA at Grenoble Code Management. For my MBA research project, I explore how cultural intelligence can be effectively integrated into organizational practices to enhance negotiation effectiveness in multinational settings. And this research goes beyond the theory, aiming to improve cross-cultural negotiations and elevate organizational performance through cultural awareness, as we will see during this webinar.
Okay, so I'm going to interview you, Maria, on some specifics that you have started as a specialist and a student and a specialist on the intercultural matters, and we'll also, of course, bring a few inputs. So what we will cover will be mostly, first of all, the concept of culture. What do we mean by culture? It seems that it's simple, but it's not that much. Second, should we prepare in an intercultural way? Third, how to negotiate with tact, how to become intercultural. And what does this mean? It means that we are able to negotiate beyond cultures, whatever the culture is. And obviously, we will focus on difficulties when the difference of cultures create obstacles to the understanding with a supplier, with a stakeholder, or whatever. And we'll end by a little presentation of a tool that we have created at EIPM just to profile negotiators and notably buyers when they approach suppliers from other cultures, other countries, other environments to see the type of cultural gaps we may have. So let's start first about what we are speaking about. I'll try to gather your own ideas, gentlemen and ladies. You can now just answer the poll that you can see on screen. How would you define a culture? Old habits, an ideology, a society, or a strategy? So just click on what for you most defines a culture. All right, that is very interesting. So many people are now answering. I'll close it. So most of you have answered that it's linked to a society. And indeed, this is how a culture has been defined. A culture is first made of social behaviors. So it has to do with social groups. What we call cultural behaviors are things that we produce to show how much we belong to a group. So socialization has to do with enculturation. It's linked to a group, and for this, it creates a norm. But not only, there's also a psychological part. And notably, social behaviors are norms in human societies, which mean that in our minds, a culture is a superstructure of conduct. It tells us how to behave, what to do. So we have that kind of small voice inside our heads, which tells us what is good and what is bad in terms of behavior. So, of course, it's culture, it's social, it's group, but it's also personality. And sometimes there's a gap between how we personally would like to behave and how culturally, socially, we are asked to behave. Right. let's go for another uh, another poll. Uh, and I'm afraid it doesn't work. What in a negotiation? What are the risks of not considering cultures enough? Misunderstanding, conflict, irritation, or boredom. So you can now start to answer. Okay, so the risk of not considering cultures enough for you mostly creates misunderstanding. Right, indeed. So, what is intercultural intelligence then? It is the capability to function critically and effectively in culturally diverse settings. Maria, what do you think about the concept of cultural quotient? What does it mean for you?
Cultural quotient. So, as you mentioned, the cultural intelligence is the ability to effectively relate the work across different cultures. And this ability is displayed through skills and qualities that an individual has to navigate different cultures and reach a goal. Through understanding and adopting through cognitive, motivational, and behavioral factors, the cultural intelligence will be improved in the negotiations. So cognitive factors such as knowledge of cultural differences, motivational factors such as settings, the objectives of the interactions, and behavioral components such as knowing how to act in those circumstances will prepare and set the conditions of success when negotiations within different cultures. However, what if the managers, professionals, and companies owners stop seeing cultural intelligence as an individual asset, but as an organizational practice? So,
And why does it matter specifically in procurement, Maria?
well, it matters because it will create a cross-cultural collaboration through the fostering diversity, individuality, and innovation, and therefore the organizational performance will reach a mutually beneficial agreement. And when companies adopt cultural intelligence as a corporate team-wide value, especially in negotiations heavy role like procurement, cross-cultural cooperation improves. These chips not only beneficial each personal individual, but also the internal relationships across the department and the relationship with the clients. When cultural intelligence become a core value, it is no longer remain as an advantage, as I mentioned, for an individual, but it will be an advantage and clear and organization a step up from the industry by implementing cultural intelligence as a core value.
Now, Maria, don't you think that sometimes we're considering too much cultures and that creates either stereotypes or overinterpretation or prejudice, or maybe we're focusing too much on psychological sides of what happens in a negotiation? Let's first ask our attendants what they think about it. If they think that we consider too much culture and what it can create in a negotiation. All right. Okay. I see that people are answering over interpretation, stereotypes, prejudice. As for now, most of you guys tend to focus on over-interpretation, right? So we interpret too much what the suppliers are saying, whereas we shouldn't, right? So we read and analyze too easily. So first of all, I'd like to say something. Remember, a culture is linked to a social group, but we belong to many social groups, right? Country is one, and this is probably one of the main understanding of intercultural. But we also have a company culture. We have a procurement culture called a function culture. We don't have the same culture as salespeople or financial people. We have an educational culture. Engineers, commercial people, self-made people do not have the same reflexes. And these are the cultures you may know about the people you're negotiating with. But there are also some cultures that you will never know. You will not know why they're behaving, the reasons for which they are behaving, because of their religious identity, of their political opinions, because of their family culture, because this is private. So what are the main cultural variations you see, Maria? And is there a risk of considering too much some cultures?
Yeah, so often we limit culture to a geographically alone aspect, but it's not just about where you're born, but it also includes industries, for example, tech versus oil and gas industries, or professions, meaning, for example, a lawyer thinks very differently from a sales or a procurement person, and even generational gaps. So because it's different to approach a conversation within baby boomers or Gen Z employees. So this will be part of the cultural intelligence on how to manage negotiation and work relationships in general.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would add something, which is obviously that be careful of not considering too much cultures, because first of all, we may be an exception to our group. It's easy to be somebody from group A, but to have reflexes and behaviors closer to group B, because this is the conflict between what the person is and what his or her cultural group is. Second thing, obviously, the way to understand cultures has to do with variables. There's a discrepancy between a typical behavior and an opposite behavior, a typical opposite behavior. What we want to do in cultures is to see if there are gaps between where I am and where the supplier or the counter negotiator is. So if there's no gap, we don't have any cultural distance and everything is fine. If there is a gap, then obviously, indeed, we have an issue. So obviously, to solve this, we need to understand how to prepare. Maria, how do you see that preparation necessity?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, preparation is the key, especially in any kind of negotiation, but not just through the technical aspect, but also to the cultural and differential aspects that we can face. So first, one of way to prepare is through assessments by identifying the difference on the needs to adaptation regarding the culture of the specific client. Will leverage in the negotiation since the beginning. So a practical example will be investigating the industry and the background of the client and even the interlocutors you're gonna face in order to understand which difference you will face through the negotiation since the beginning. The next one will be through workshops, meaning through focused activities, discussion, and exercises related to cultural intelligence in negotiations, where negotiators will gain practice on how to handle these cultural scenarios properly and be more confident in an overall negotiation. The next tool will be through the briefs. I think this is the more neglected one and one of the most important. So after each negotiation, the brief allows the team to review success, addresses challenges, and plan improvement. And this will be reflected in future negotiations on how multicultural context will be used in a better way to get a better outcome in negotiations. And finally, through training, by using sequential learning practice and assessment, not only will each member of the team will acquire a successful skill for negotiation in multicultural settings, but also managers will ensure that the team has a cultural intelligence skill adapted to the needs of the company and of the objectives of the team.
So why to prepare? Well, probably to set foundations, to avoid misunderstanding, and of course to get better outcomes. So how to conduct negotiations interculturally? Once we have prepared what to pay attention to when we are in the conversation, the negotiation with the supplier or whatever. And I've prepared another poll here to understand from you the main cultural behaviors which, in your opinion, in your experience, can obstruct a negotiation. It may be about being interrupted, about being on time or not on time, about speaking too much, being too explicit, not being enough flexible. It's about thinking too much before acting or doing the contrary, having many facts or not enough facts, speaking for oneself or for the company. So that is obviously several items, and I'd like to see what are the most important ones for you. All right. So that is very spread, as you may see, right? So apparently the two winners are, the three winners now are interruption, being interrupted or not, but also speaking too much or not enough about oneself, speaking for oneself or not, and explicitness, which is how much we speak about all the details, right? But I see that being on time or being late is still an important one, right? We will call this monochronism or polychronism, but still interruption or not being interrupted apparently is one of your major issues. So let's try to browse very quickly a number of variables which make these cultural differences. First of all, respect of agreed times. When we have an agenda, should we really stick to it or allow ourselves to deviate from it? It all depends on the culture you're in, right? So some people may think that deviating from it is being late, forget the deadline, being unstructured. Some people think that sticking to the agenda is being psycho-rigid. Another difference can be the simultaneity of tasks. Can we jump from one subject to another? Or should we just stick to one subject and close it before going to the first one, right? So two different cultural postures. Another one is disruption, and it has to do with the ability to be interrupted. The openness to be interrupted. In some cultures, it's more than accepted. It's even welcome because it's part of reacting in real time. In other cultures, it's not appreciated to be interrupted. Another difference can be on verticality. Hierarchy. So some propositions, negotiation propositions, have to refer to the strategy, what has been decided, etc., etc. Others do not. It has also to be with explicitness. Some people say a lot, say all details, they know everything about a negotiation context. Some people just say a little, and of course they undermean all the rest. It has to do with flexibility too. Sticking to the role, to a point of view, or on the contrary, formalizing scenarios, changing roles all the time. It has to do personal status. Some cultures like titles, like statuses, and then in that case prepare formal communication. Some cultures refer to past results, to other appreciations, to real performance. So just speak about past achievements. It has to do with the materiality of cultures. Some cultures like tangible results. They like things which are sound and proven. Other cultures like more the process. It's not so important if you reached success or not. What is important is how you did it. With the first ones, you should quantify, monetize as much as possible. With the second ones, you should insist on the process, the mode, the method, the way to do it, and even the principles and the value. Right. Some cultures like to think before doing, and some cultures like to do before thinking, right? So think before doing means mental preparation, means analysis, and the doing before thinking means, on the contrary, taking initiatives, doing first, trying to see if things works before doing anything. Some cultures refer a lot to ego, and notably to ego values. Like some cultures value the fact of winning competitions. Other cultures prefer, on the contrary, satisfaction, and do not like that any party wins. So more collaborative or more competitive cultures. Some cultures insist a lot on truth because there's one truth to discover. Other cultures like that everything is relative. So with the first ones, you have to build the truth and build the truth through facts. With other cultures, you have to alternate negotiation leadership and let them lead as much as you do. Some cultures value openness, focusing on facts, and other cultures like the future, right? So it's more a present orientation or a future orientation. It can be a cultural difference too. Some cultures do not, the various cultures do not see the relation at the same level. Some cultures like the personal level for a relation, so it's negotiator to negotiator. Other cultures, on the contrary, see it more at the organizational level. So we need to formulate the organizational value. Some cultures claim for their rights. Some cultures like to stick to the goal. Whatever their right is, they want to reach a goal. In the first ones, you have to pamper the negotiator as a unique person, as a respectable person. In the other ones, you have to refer to the goal and reassert the goal during the negotiation. Some cultures like to speak for themselves. Negotiators speak for themselves, speak about say their own opinions. In other cultures, when a negotiator speaks, he or she has to speak for others, for the company, for the team. With the first type of culture, you have to ask, you have to make opinions, dare to express your subjectivity. In the second type of culture, you have to refer to the strategy and what you are asked to do. So, Maria, how would you recommend us to adapt to the other party when we see a different culture?
So the main way to do it is through communication. So communication is the key. Communication is crucial for cross-cultural negotiation. It leverages the interaction by adapting communication styles and emotions. And at the end of the day, it prevents miscommunications between the parties to keep the negotiation on track. Regarding adaptation in communication, this is not only mean or it doesn't relate just to the language, but also it refers to the means and to the tools used. Just by understanding this difference, the tone and the smoothness of the negotiation can be set. So think about Slack and Teams and Google Chat, which are revolutionizing the ways we communicate within an organization. That requires adaptation and that are part of the culture of the person, of the company, etc. So probably you will have noticed how in an organization information is starting to get shared differently in a more dynamic and faster way than before. And depending who you're communicating with, a chat message will be as binding as a formal email for certain topics.
Yeah.
Then, sorry.
Go ahead. What about uniformity then?
Yeah, so communication is also about consistency and finding uniformity between the different cultures. By defining guidelines and cross-cultural communication, setting clear concepts and selecting appropriate interlocutors will help to prevent misunderstandings and create smoother negotiations processes.
All right. How to build trust then, Maria? How would you recommend us to build trust?
At the end, that's the objective of cultural intelligence in negotiation, is to build trust. So by showing respect from your counterpart's culture signals and genuine interest into collaboration, that will be crucial to build trust and also to build long-term success. So this trust building requires preparation and strong communication skills, as we have seen so far. And therefore, managers can promote cultural intelligence by prioritizing practices that reflects respect, empathy, and active listening, and developing cultural sensitivity. This will enable the team to foster trust and lead into better negotiations in a long term.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good inputs. I'd like to interview you now, Maria, on difficulties. So now we understand more about what are cultural differences about, various dimensions, how we can adapt, how we can create uniformity, how we can build trust to solve this. But of course, you know, people still have difficulties and suddenly do not manage to negotiate because they feel so far away from how the other party behaves. So I'd like to ask you 4 questions, but of course, as usual, I will ask the same questions, Maria, to our attendants. So my first question is it just a question of diplomacy and patience? So do you think just being intercultural means that we should just wait and be patient? That was interesting. We have, yeah, an answer of mostly no. It's not even more than this now. 87% of people say no. So, Maria, what's your take on it? Is it just a question of diplomacy, of patience?
It's a no. So we can just understand cultural intelligence as a cultural appropriation, and what can be understood as polite in one place or in one culture is not going to be polite in another sometimes. So cultural intelligence is not about copying, but rather understanding and adapting yourself to handle this difference. An effective integration of cultural intelligence into negotiation strategies involve understanding cultural difference and adapting your styles of communication and preparation, emotional management, etc. Cultural intelligence negotiators that anticipate and know how to navigate these cultural challenges will go beyond diplomacy and will create meaningful and successful interactions with the counterparties.
Clear. Okay. Thank you very much, Maria. I'd like to ask you a second question, which is, when it's happening, when you have that intercultural tension, how to deactivate it. And as usual, I'd like to ask it to our attendants first, right? How to deactivate this? By re-explaining, just stating again your standpoint. By changing negotiators, you just change people. By just taking distance by a coffee break or just escalating to their bosses or their main stakeholders. So what do you guys think about it? As for now, we have a vast majority for coffee break. So we will never know if
It's
this
called
is your behavioral opinion or if you just like coffee, guys. But 90%, more than 90% of you think that it's calling for a break or for a distance. So what's your opinion as a specialist? What's your opinion on this, Maria?
So first, I want to start with the options of the answers. Every answer except the escalating one might be appropriate depending which is the situation, but I will try to classify them in three main groups. So one is to stay clear and direct by clarifying or restating what is confusing or different between what you're trying to communicate will diffuse the misunderstanding. The second one is to take a break. So go for a coffee break or stop the meeting, reschedule, etc. This will help to reset the emotions of the interlocutors. And stepping back will reduce the tension in the negotiation and return to a neutral tone and help and restore productivity in the negotiation. And finally, to use empathy. When you are trained and when you understand the cultural differences, you're aware of the emotions and of the needs regarding culture of your counterpart. So by managing an escalating and his escalating conflict by promoting patience and helping negotiator to respond calmly and don't lose your head when this type of conflicts arise, will give you an opportunity to solve this tension.
You're mentioning empathy. That's a very interesting thing. Maria, do you think that empathy can be only used when there is a tension, or it has to be prepared up front and you need to be empathetic from the start of the negotiation to avoid that kind of
Well,
cultural tensions?
ideally would be since the preparation, but even when you're prepared, there are situations that you can just uh, visualize or have an answer since before. So, if you're prepared, you know how to handle this situation that you didn't foresee. So yeah, empathy means, as we mentioned, not to be diplomatic, but to be understandable. And maybe the most easy way to do it is to ask, what are you understanding that I'm missing, or why is causing you this trouble?
Sure. And that takes us to our next question. It's obviously empathy is on the general level of the relationship between the two negotiators. And on this dimension, I'd like to understand what can help these two negotiators to reduce stress and build trust. Is it by creating empathy? Is it by, as we were just saying, is just trying to understand how they think, what are their interests, trying to know more, put ourselves in their shoes? Is it more something personal, knowing them personally? Is it about being above differences? Let's see what people answer first, and then you will tell us your expert's point of view. Okay. Well, you've spoken about empathy, and people still are clicking on empathy. Uh, but we see also an interesting part on putting oneself in the supplier's shoes, which is obviously something different because it's more rational. Empathy is probably more a mix of rational and emotional. Putting oneself in the supplier's shoes is trying to understand also their good reasons for behaving as they do. So, Maria, how to help negotiators to reduce stress and build trust?
Yeah, well, for sure, as we mentioned, empathy is like one of the main, but also by showing respect. It's not mostly about putting yourself in someone else's shoes because you don't have the whole context, and it's kind of impossible to know them personally in a professional level to know everybody. But if you show respect, if you really show interest on their beliefs, on how they their cultural needs, that will create empathy, and that will reduce the stress of a negotiation. It will build a more empathic and more closeness into the relationship through the negotiation.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have a last question for you, Maria, and of course for everybody. It's just, that's very practical. What should we pay attention to that can create that kind of difficulties? Is it the language we speak? We have differences in the language. Is it the generation? Because I'm Gen Z and he or she is Gen X. In the company, because we are from different companies with a totally different mindset. Is it personal behaviors, personality? Is it education? Some people are more or less educating in a field or in another. Is it something more personal, like the religion or the political opinions that create this? So let's start to first see what is really the main thing to be careful of, right? So you now have a few seconds to answer. Let's see what you guys are answering. Behaviors, right? Be for most of you, but some people, more and more people are clicking on language. All right, so behaviors, personal behaviors, language. Oops, I see now some people clicking on religion. Very interesting is that nobody has clicked yet on generation or education. Very interesting, right? So it's not a problem for all of you guys. The problem mostly comes from personal behaviors and or languages. And only 8% have answered on company culture, right? So now what do you think of this personally as an expert, Maria?
Yeah,
Which
so
common...
two main categories we can see of cultural misunderstanding is communication and behavioral. So communication meaning differences in languages, in meanings, and a style of communicating are common source of confusion. And it's like when you want to communicate something, but it is received in a different way. Behavioral, of course, because norms around actions, meaning handshakes, punctuality, humor, and even dress codes are very different between cultures. So, for example, even something as simple as wearing a suit might be perceived very well in a finance firm, but in a tech startup, it will be kind of awkward to show up in a full suit. And finally, another category where I can classify the main issues of culture is how to manage a conflict. So cultural differences can lead to quick misunderstandings, as we can see, and the approach of resolving conflicts often depends on each party background. For example, to understand if it's culturally appropriate from your counterpart when there's a misunderstanding to escalate it to the superior or not. Depending the culture and the company, it can be good or bad perceived, that escalation.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much for your answer. That's interesting. So you're contradicting a little bit what we were saying before, and I like this contradiction. You say that the professional environment can be one of the main triggers, right? You spoke about finance and suits, and it's not only people or language. I'd like to ask you, a very simple question. Do you think, as an expert, you've studied all these phenomena, Maria? Do you think these cultural differences, languages or company culture or whatever, do you think they're getting worse and worse, less and less, or are they just saying the same? What's the trend?
What's happening is that after the boom of globalization, most of the companies, we're talking about professionally aspects, most of the companies are turning into a multicultural and multinational setting. So most, especially with new generations, this type of cultural differences are being less marked, less notorious than before, because people are more well informed. It is more common for you to see everywhere all the cultural differences there are. So it's not like that drastic shock that before, where you didn't knew what was going on.
Fine. Thank you very much. I'd like to present the kind of conclusion already what we developed at EIPM, a tool to assess the profile, right? So you see that in this tool that we have developed, we profile people among 5 main variables. One has to do with time, and it has to do with disruption, agreed time, simultaneity of tasks, etc., etc. The other one has to do with hierarchy, power, verticality, personal status. The third one has to do with risks, if we're cultures who like to take risks or dislike risks. It also, the fourth variable has to do with the affinity with competition, competing among people, and the first one has to do with the focus on the individual or on the collectivity, right? So the first one opposes monochronism to polychronism, monotask people to polytask people. The second one opposes people who like flat hierarchies, low hierarchies, in which usually there's a lot of communication top down, but also bottom up realities from the field rising up to the top of the organization. On the contrary, in high hierarchy, you have a much bigger organization and you only have the top-down flocks. Cultures opposing risk-taking and risk-avoiding countries or environments. In risk-taking cultures, people tend to be more open, curious, like the unknown, oriented to the future, more relativistic, whereas in risk-avoiding cultures, they're more reluctant to the unknown and they like fact-proof, things which are right or wrong and can be proved, and they like to think before anything. The fourth dimension of our tool opposes competitive cultures to cooperative cultures. Competitive cultures are cultures driven by results and not by methods, by assertions. They frequently communicate in implicit ways. Cooperative cultures, on the contrary, focus on the method much more than on the result, on the merit, and tend to be more explicit. The last dimension of the IPM tool is individualist versus collaborative cultures. And I have a technical issue there. And it's obviously working as a person in an environment or for the environment as a person. How does our tool look like? It's a series of 30 questions. You can see here an example, a sample of a question. So time to read the question and meditate and choose your answer. It takes around 1 minute per question. So it takes around half an hour to take this survey and to get your final profile, where you are profiled on each of the dimensions, right? Right. Thank you very much. I'd like now to leave space for the 5-10 remaining minutes to the questions. Is there any question on what we discussed with Maria? Questions for myself or for Maria? Any question before we close? Oh, there we have a question. How we can influence different cultures? Would you like to answer this question, Maria? Is there a possibility to influence cultures, in your opinion? I'll say my take just after you. I have an opinion on
So
this.
the idea is not to influence different cultures, but to understand that, let's say in a easier word, to don't get offended if someone behaves differently than you. It's more about understanding and knowing everybody is different, everybody have different expectations. So the fact is not to influence different cultures, but to understand and don't get it personally, and better to use these differences and know how to approach them to get your different goals. So for example, in procurement, to find the best vendor, to modify the contract clauses to get a better deal, etc.
Yeah, I was to say the same. Cultures, and this is probably why we're so obsessed with them, are super strong. There's no way to influence a culture. It would take too much time. It's too long and it's too much effort, and we're probably not supposed to do so. But trying to apprehend cultures, to understand them, to be compatible with them, to be above them, to understand the others, to adapt to the others. That's probably what we have to do. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to just to say that you will receive a link if you want to test this cultural profiler. You will be able to test the beta version. So if you just register on the link, you can test this cultural profiler. You can also get an access to our Nego profiler. The links are in the chat. And by the way, all these topics, notably the cultural one, will be debated during one of our courses, which is about negotiations. It's happening in spring 2025. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Maria, to have given your expert point of view. And hope to see you again in our next webinar, 5th of December. Thank you.